And now we're recording. And again, thank you guys very much for attending. So I'm in Revit 2021, and the program I'm giving you training on, when you install it into Revit, you get this Axiom ribbon panel. In the upper left, these buttons that I'm putting my cursor over are the program Microsoft Office Importer for Revit. Now, to give you a little background on the program, some of which, some of you may know this already, some may not. The program actually, as Microsoft Office Importer, has existed since 1996 in MicroStation. And in 2012, we developed an AutoCAD version. And then a little over 2.5 years ago now, we developed a version for Revit. And as a result, it's inherited, as far as its basic functionality, a couple of decades of development and research that we've done in MicroStation and then the other platforms, as I mentioned. Obviously, there are some differences between the Revit environment and what you would have in like AutoCAD or MicroStation, but still the basic functionality when it comes to what it was designed for, which is to take external Word and Excel files or portions of them and paste them into different areas of a Revit project is still the basic functionality. But there's a bunch of settings and features and stuff like that, which I'll go over as well. All right, so I'll go out to some sample files that I have. And this is a standard Excel file that I use. And I'll just highlight a section of it, do a copy, go back, and I'll click the first button, which is paste. This analyzes the information, turns it into Revit objects. More on that in a moment. And then when I click and then click finish on this dialog box and zoom in, you'll see the pasted data. Now, this information, when I paste it, if I go into the settings, and notice that I'm in a sheet, by the way, and I'm using Excel, under pasting, you'll see this option here. It says paste Excel files as, and the default is as schedule. This applies directly and only to pasting Excel files or portions of them into a Revit project sheet. So it turns it into a schedule. That's the fastest for pasting it. And in addition, because we're pasting it as a schedule, we can show or honor colored text and filled cells like you see here in the paste that I did. You also have the option in a sheet by changing this here to text, notes, and lines. So it's a detail group, and that's just going to show black text, black lines. And that's also applies to pasting it into a sheet. Now, there are other areas outside of a sheet where we can paste into, many areas, as a matter of fact. And when you do so, it's for Excel, it's always going to be a detail group with text, notes, and lines. In addition, Word, and I'll do some paste with Word as well here in a little bit, no matter where you paste it, whether it's in a sheet or outside of a sheet, it's always going to be a detail group. But in either case, because it's Revit objects, after you've got the data pasted in, you could give the project to anyone. And if you do not include the source file that the paste came from, it doesn't matter. The person that you give the project to is going to see the pasted data without a problem at all. And in addition, they won't get any odd link errors or anything like that, because after you paste the data in, the paste does not rely on the source file in order to show the pasted data. However, if you have a paste and you have Microsoft Office Importer, you can do some things with the pasted data using the program itself. So, for example, if I go to this button here, Edit Source, and I click it, it'll find the source file and it'll open it in its application, and it'll also highlight the exact pasted area. So you don't have to go looking around for the pasted area in the file when it's open. Then from here, I'll make a couple of obvious changes. I'll change the color of this text, and I'll change the information in this cell here in the upper left. Save the file, because Microsoft Office Importer deals with the file as it's written to disk. Then when I go back to Revit, if I click this Manage Link button, I can click Update, and this will look at the source file, and then based on changes I made, it'll update the paste accordingly, as you see there. Now, this dialog box gives you a couple of other items as well. One is, this is the name of the source file, and if the file name is changed or if it's moved on disk, you click this Select button, and you can navigate out and pick the file up again. And when you do that, and then click Open, it'll reset the link to the file. Also, you see here it says, with this checkbox option, update automatically when the project opens. The default for that in the Revit version of this program is to prompt you. So if you close Revit, the next time you open a project with a Microsoft Office Importer paste, it'll give you a little dialog box that'll say something like, I found pastes that could be updated for Microsoft Office Importer. Would you like to update them, yes or no? If you say yes, it'll update all of the ones that need to be updated based on changes made in their source files. If you say no, it'll leave them alone, but you can manually update them one at a time using this dialog box like I showed you just a short bit ago. Or you can update multiple ones at a time through another dialog box called the list of links, which I'll show you in just a little bit. And you also see here Excel attributes. This is the top left cell and the bottom right cell that the paste is composed of from Excel. And you could use these fields in the following fashion. If I click Edit Source, for example, and I insert a new column and save the file, if I update the paste now, you're going to see that it'll push this last column outside of the original pasted area. So with these fields, you could adjust the scope of the paste on the fly, in this case, to pick up the data that was part of the paste initially. You could also use these fields to expand or contract the scope of the paste, or even just move the scope of the paste if you needed to do anything like that at all. So that's the basic operation with Excel in a sheet. I'm going to go to another sheet here. In this case, I'm going to go to my Word sample file. I'm going to grab this section of data here because this section of the Word file has a bunch of different formatting. It's got bold, italic, and underlined text, different fonts, numbered paragraphs, indented paragraphs, bulleted paragraph, and also some table data and superscript and subscript text. So I'll highlight that area, copy it, go back to Revit, and I'll click the paste button, click once, finish, and when I zoom in, you'll see it very exactly duplicated the formatting that I had in the file that I brought it in from. Now, this data is also linked back to the source file, but one of the things I'm going to point out to you about Word that's a bit different from Excel is this. Excel, we have the luxury of being able to use the range of cells. So that as that scope changes, we can change the scope as far as the range of cells to say, pull the data from here. In Word, we don't have that luxury. So what you might run into, or I'm going to give you data of something that if you want or need to add data to the bottom of the pasted area, for example, I'll zoom in on this a little bit. I'll go back to my Word file, and here's some things you may need to care for. Now notice where the paste ends, and I actually told Word to show me the scope of what's called a bookmark. So when we do a paste from the top here, you'll see this little, as I zoom in here a little bit, scroll down here, there's a little gray bracket here on the left of the S. And what I told Word is to show me where the bookmarks start and end. And then if I go to the bottom, you'll see there's another gray bracket here. So this is the scope of the bookmark that Microsoft Office Importer wrote into the Word file to keep track of the scope of the paste I just did. Now, if you need to add data to the bottom of the paste, for example, what you wouldn't want to do is this. And in fact, you may have run into this already if you've tried this. If you go beyond the bookmark, the last gray bracket there, and then you add data to this paste, for example, and save the file. When I go back, if I update the paste, nothing's going to happen. You'll see here at the bottom, when I update it, there was no data added to the bottom of the paste here. So the reason it did that is because that data I added is outside the scope of the bookmark that's used to keep track of the paste in Word. So here's what I recommend is go to the Home tab in Word, turn on your white space or formatting option here. This is a toggle. And you see here, then you see the paragraph mark. Put your cursor in front of that, and then press once and once again. Notice how the gray bracket follows that paragraph mark there. And now I can add the new data to the null paragraph that's above that. And I always tend to add a null paragraph just to make sure I'm within the scope of the paste. Save the file after you make the change. Now when I go back, if I then click Manage Link and click Update, notice now it found the data that I added to the bottom of the paste, and it's now part of the paste. And okay, I got some questions here, so let me pause here for a moment. What if your Word file has page breaks? Page breaks currently are, and that's coming from James. Page breaks, it doesn't matter. What the paste looks like to Microsoft Office Importer is that there are no page breaks. So it just copies the data as one big thing. However, we are doing some research to see if there's a way that we can have page breaks honored, and there's also an idea that we're investigating a little bit, where you can put like null paragraphs or maybe some sequence of characters or something like that to tell it where to break the columns. And I just got word this morning, I haven't had a chance to install it or play with it a bit, that once you have a paste in Revit, you're going to be able to adjust the column height a bit after you have the paste in directly. In other words, not having to redo the paste or anything like that. I just haven't had a chance to play with that yet, so I can't show it to you yet. Now we have another question. If multiple people have to edit the Word doc, do they all need to have the importer program to see the gray bracket of where the paste scope is? Very good question. The answer is no. As soon as one person does the paste, and let me go back to Word here. Let me see. Forgot where the formatting is here, but bookmarks. Okay, so that's where the bookmark is. And if I say go to, so here's what you can do. Go to the search in Word and type in bookmarks. And then see where it says insert a bookmark. You click that and it'll show the bookmarks in the file. You can click on I just have the one here where the paste is and say go to. And what it does is it highlights the entire bookmark here. So I close that and go to the bottom of it. You'll see the scope of the paste there. There's another way, and I forgot how to do this in, let's see, show bookmarks. I forgot how to turn on the toggle that shows that little gray bracket. So let's see here. Tap insert, troubleshoot Word options. There we go. I think it's here. Da, 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 da. I'm selecting allowed. Copy paste image. Show. Yeah, show bookmarks. So where it says show document content, where it says show bookmarks, when you turn that on, that's what shows the gray brackets there. And that'll help you find the scope of the paste. For as long as one paste was done from Microsoft Office Importer and it sets that bookmark, then you can turn on that option so that people that don't have Microsoft Office Importer, they can see the scope of the bookmark and then be able to add the data accordingly. And that should handle your question, Jessica. Then I have another question here. It says, when changes the size of Excel column, how do I get it to wrap the text? It typically gives me the symbol and doesn't show all the information. Oh, the ellipsis symbol. In that case, that's a little bit different of an animal, and that question is coming from Carolyn. So here's what happens. The size of the text in the fields that you see here is when it comes to pasting data from Excel or Word actually into Revit, the way Windows handles the text size and the way Revit handles the text size is slightly different. So you may end up with this, and I'll give an example of what Carolyn here asked about. So I'm going to add another character or two to this first cell here. In fact, let me zoom in on it so you can see it. To see how the text is wider there. So I'll save that and I'll grab just that small section, do a copy. You guys are giving me good questions, by the way. You're keeping me on my toes. And then I'll paste that data and finish. And when I zoom in, it didn't quite fill it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Excel and I'm going to push down the column width a little bit. Let's see what that does. What I'm trying to do is Carolyn was saying when she does a paste, sometimes the data in a particular cell ends up showing an ellipsis where it's cutting off some of the text. So I'm just trying to simulate that to give you an idea, and it's still operating fine. Okay, so we'll do it a little bit more severe then. There we go. Now that should, when I do the paste, just before I clicked that, Revit said, hey, I'm going to do something else. Okay, let's close that. Save, copy, and we'll go back to Revit here in a second. Once it decides what it wants to do. All right. And I got a couple more questions here that I'll handle after I handle question here. And Thor mentions something. Thor Wiggins, one of our longtime customers, mentioned something about, I believe it's the question you had, Carolyn. Give me just a second here. All right, let me orient myself, go copy. Sorry about the delay there, and go back and paste. And when I zoom in, yeah, so you see the ellipses there. So that cuts off the text. So there's two ways to handle that. One is you go back to your Excel file and just adjust the column width here a little bit, save the file, and then when you go back, you can then go to manage link, update to paste, and that change made, see how it widened it? So I need to widen it a little bit more. Save the file. As long as you save the file after you make the changes like that to the column width or row height, it'll recognize it as a change where you can then use the update button for manage here to go. So that's the way to handle it normally. There's also, Thor Wiggins says we found that if you go to format cells and autofill the row, that will handle it. Now I'll have to, in fact, let me gather that data here from, what I'll do is I'll send that as a, I'll gather the data that that Mr. Wiggins here gave us, and I'll get that in an email form that I can send to you separately, Carolyn, and anybody else that wants it. File, save as, so Office. And there's another thing I'm going to show you related to that, which will also help, but this is more of a settings thing that you'd have to play with a little bit. So when I go to the last button here, settings, under pasting, actually no, scale, notice it has width padding and height padding. This controls the blank space around the text in cells. That's either in Word tables or in Excel. So for example, if I change this to 1.6 in both cases and save my settings, now if I go back, actually let me turn off my mapping, save that, and I'm going to do a paste again, but this time I'm going to do the paste from Excel where I have the column width a little bit narrow there. And now you'll see when I paste this data, make sure I save that. I'm not sure if I did. There we go. It'll pretty dramatically, depending on what you put there. Oh, let me copy it again. It'll pretty dramatically change the formatting that you see. Finish. That's when I scroll down. Whoop. Let me zoom out here. That'll make it easier. Fit. Let me zoom in. So see how that that widened it without me altering a bit. So here's with that 1.6, 1.6. I'll leave the Excel file alone so you can have a comparison, and I'll just change the setting back to what it was at 1.3. Again, this is something that you might have to play with as far as the settings to get it where it's optimum for you. Save that. Now I'll do the same paste, and you'll see how it changed the format based on that height and width padding. See, so how it cuts it off now here in this first column, whereas here with the 1.6, it left it wide enough. Yeah, you're welcome, Carolyn. So those are the three different ways. Yeah, and then Thor also mentions that they modified their padding width and height to 1.45, and that seems to have fixed the issues too related to that same thing. So there's a number of things like he mentioned. One is go to format cells and autofill the row, and then also the height and width padding, like I mentioned, and also tweaking the column width and the row height in the Excel file itself or in the Word table as well. And we have another question I haven't got to. You guys are full of questions. This is awesome. So can you get real Revit schedule names for Excel schedules yet? You already know the tab name. Just use that to assign the schedule name. That's from Scott. Scott, not yet. That's something we're still working on. In fact, there's some things related to that we're that the product manager is actively working on, just so you know. So we can't have Revit schedule names yet, but again, it's being worked on. In fact, let's see, I think I mentioned this already. No, I didn't. Some other things that we're working on that we are testing is connection to SharePoint, so files that are saved in SharePoint and also in BIM 360. We have those in alpha, and those will be ready for beta here in a bit once we do some more testing. So there's active development going on, almost all these things that I mentioned that we don't have yet, and some other things that we're also looking at and working on as well. Okay, so let me reorient myself to where I was before I was answering all those questions. And feel free to ask me more if you need to. It's totally fine. So I'm going to undo the paste that I did there. And I showed you a word paste and how to adjust or look for the scope of the paste if you need to. And so now I'm going to go into a drafting view, and I'm going to do a paste of Excel into a drafting view. Now, again, this is going to be different because I'm pasting Excel or Word, either case, into a drafting view. It's going to be a detail group. Now with Excel, it's going to be different because unlike a sheet, we're not going to have colored text or filled cells at all. So when I paste the data, in fact, it looks like I need to reset some of my settings here. You'll see it's just black text and lines, but this is linked back to the source file, just like the other paste I showed you. And okay, I see. And Thor was like, "Hey, I didn't realize that we could paste into drafting groups now." Well, you can't. That's actually been since the program's been around, just so you know. And I have another question here, so I'll pause from it. When we paste a Word document, we want to be able to set the paste at the bottom quarter of the sheet and have the next column start at the top of the sheet. Is that possible yet? Not quite, but it's possible that was Thor's question, by the way. It may be possible based on a new build that we got about 11:30 this morning. I just haven't had a chance to test it yet. And that may help solve some of what you're talking about, where it's supposed to be now, where when you paste columns, like you split paste into columns, which I'll show you in a little bit, after you've got the paste in, you can grab the column and adjust the height of it a bit, pushing text to the top of the next sheet. So that is being, like I said, I have a build for it. I just haven't had it installed or ability to test it yet. But as soon as we have it tested and it's alpha tested, and people that are interested in that sort of functionality can just let us know, and we'd be glad to get it to them once we're satisfied with it on our end. So should I put you down for that, Thor? Okay, cool. I'm making a note here off to the side. Alrighty then, let me save that so it doesn't get lost in the midst of me closing things down. Alrighty. Okay, 2-0. Alrighty then. So let me go back to my settings because there's one setting that I wanted to. I've been messing with my settings and forgot where I saved things or kept things. All right, so that was an example of a paste into a drafting view. And again, at Word or Excel, outside of a sheet, it's always going to be a detail group, I should say, in a drafting view or other areas. And then when I go to this next area, here, this gives you an example of what areas we can paste into in a Revit project. So we've been able to paste into sheets, which I showed you, a drafting view, which I just showed you, and also legends for pretty much since the program has been around. In addition, a little over a year and a half ago, we also had the ability to paste into floor plans, area plans, ceiling plans, and engineering plans as well. Again, outside of a sheet, it's always going to be a detail group for Word or Excel. And sheet is the only one where you can differentiate, where Excel, you have the option of pasting it as a schedule or a detail group, and Word will be a detail group. All right. So now that I've got the basics covered and some little inside baseball on dealing with Word and it's how it keeps track of paste in the Word file, I'm going to go into this list of links dialog box. And actually, let me do another paste here. So I'm going to grab a section of my Excel file. I wanted to show you something specific related to this dialog box, and since I jumped around a bit, I didn't have things set up exactly the way I wanted for the next thing I was going to show you here. So let me just go to there, do another paste, click, finish. Now I'm going to make another change here. Save that, and we'll make this 555. And save that as well. Okie dokie. So now, when I go to the list of links dialog box, notice that these are all of the links in the current project. So these are the Microsoft Office Importer links that are currently active in this particular Revit project. If you double click on a link, it's going to take you to the pasted area inside the project, so you don't have to go looking around for it. In addition, under details, if it says Ole link, that's a word paste always. So if it says Ole link, no matter what it says after that, it's always a word paste. If it says anything else, it's going to be the sheet name and the range of cells that the paste is composed of from Excel. You also see under status, it will tell you whether the paste is up to date or not based on the file modification date and time of the source file for the paste written to disk. If a paste is not up to date, it will also tell you, like you see here for these two. And if you see one or more of these, you can use Shift or Control click to select the ones you want, click Update, and it'll check all the source files, all the exact pasted areas, and update them accordingly, as you see there. In addition, you have some other tools here. Fit and View, that's the same as double clicking on the paste. It just does that without double clicking on the link there. You can open the Manage dialog box from here. You can edit the source file from here. Source folder opens Windows Explorer into the folder where you've got that source file saved. So if you needed to go look around there for whatever reason, you could do so. And then delete is just that. It will delete the paste. So I'm going to do that for two of these just to clean things up for the next major feature to show you here. And let me go back to my first sheet here. I'll go into my settings and under pasting, at the top this time, you see it's got split paste in the columns. That's on by default. And for Excel, with that on, you can tell it to repeat so many rows of header information over the top of each column that's split off. So I'm going to put 5 there for now and then turn that option off for the moment because I can apply it on the fly, which I'll show you in just a second, and then save my settings and click OK. Now I'm going to go to Excel, copy all of the paste. This is about 4 pages of data, by the way. And then I'll click the paste button. And then I'll click once in the upper left. I'll split the paste with this button on the secondary dialog box, pick column height and gap width. And yeah, I've still got something on my settings, so that's fine for now. And then I paste it. Oh, I think because I widened some columns. And then on the fly, I can say, or I've got my added column there, I just realized. I can say repeat the header rows of over the top of any column that's split off, click redraw. And there you see paste the data. I click finish. When I zoom in, there's the data, there's the paste. Now, I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to do it in Word, or from Word. This is also about 4 pages of data. I'm going to turn my formatting characters off just so I can see things a little better, and close this and zoom out a bit and grab all of it this time, copy it, and I'll go back and I'll paste that data. Split that into columns, and I'm going to leave a column off to the right, split off here. So I can use this to give me an example of something I'm going to explain about this feature, which is not obvious from the program interface. And then I'll click finish. So now when I zoom in, you'll see it's got this last column here. And the reason I did this is because about, a little over 2 years ago, I showed this to a prospect who's since become a customer. And he told me that he needed to, or he had a customer that gave him a 128-page Word document with specifications that he needed to make part of the Revit project sheets for this customer. When I showed this to him, he said, I'd like to be able to paste all of that file into one sheet, splitting it into columns, and then allow me to do this, grab the columns that are split off, cut them, go to another sheet, and then paste them in. And he said, when I do so, I'd like those columns to still be part of the same paste. That way, if I have to update the paste, the columns will still update even though they're split off onto other sheets. So we did that for him. So that works for both Word and Excel, and it works in the same type of view or area. So you can go sheet to sheet, drafting view to drafting view, legend to legend, that sort of thing, but you can't cross-use. Even Revit wouldn't allow you to do that sort of thing, as a matter of fact. So that's splitting paste into columns in all its glory. Now, as I mentioned, we do have an alpha version that's going to give you the ability, after you have columns pasted in, to adjust the height of them, and that would even be for any columns that you split into or any paste that you split into columns. I just haven't had a chance to load that up and play with it yet. All right, so now we're going to go into the settings and text. So by default, and that's what I've been using for this training so far, is you can use the same fonts as the source document, but any font that's available to you in Revit, you can use as a default font. If you do use a default font, let's say Arial, for example, if the Word or Excel file contains other fonts other than Arial, for example, then the program's going to have to do some font mapping from whatever font it is in Word or Excel to the font that you want to use as the default font here. If that's the case, then you might end up with some font mapping issues where, due to character height and width differences and also character spacing, you might end up with some formatting issues in your paste. So in order to mitigate or completely resolve or not have those type of formatting issues, if you use a default font, we recommend that you use that same font exclusively in the Word or Excel file. That way you won't run into font mapping issues like that due to the differences in character height and width and character spacing when you're mapping one font to the other. Also, you see here when it says import colored text, that applies again only when you're pasting Excel as a schedule into a sheet. Borders. So by default, it brings in the borders if they're drawn in around cells, and if they're not drawn in around cells, it won't draw them. Then you can also say always. In that case, it will draw them whether they exist drawn around the cells in the Excel file or cells in a Word table or not. It'll always draw them. And never will just bring in the text itself. It won't draw the border lines, even if they're drawn in and around the cells in Word tables or the Excel file itself. And also import filled cells. This again only applies to pasting Excel into a sheet to bring in the filled cells. Now, both this import filled cells and also import colored text, those would have to be on before you do the paste. If you try to turn them on after and update the paste, it's not going to have an effect on it. These settings apply to the paste itself when you're first doing it. scale. So I touched upon this a little bit, particularly from the viewpoint of the paste width, or the width padding and height padding. We also added, and I just haven't played with this a little, I've only played with this a little bit, the ability to control the paste width and the gap width for the columns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these on, and notice by inches, I can say make the paste this width, and the gap between columns, when I split paste in the columns, an inch in this case. And you'd have to play with this to get the paste to lay out the way you want, but I'm going to set it here and save my settings. Let me go back and make sure I don't have anything else odd. As in source fine, that's fine. Okay, so now I'm going to do a paste with Excel here, and then a paste with Word with that option on. And again, in setting that, you may have to play with that setting a little bit, depending on the paste you're trying to do, to get it to line up the way you want in your paste here. So I've grabbed, let me see, let me grab all of my Excel file. All right, so notice how narrow it is now compared to what it was before. So I click once, and then I split it. And notice, even though I move my cursor out and away, notice how the gap between the columns is precisely the same. So by setting the column width, it's set that to 6 inches, and then the gap between the columns is set at 1 inch. It's not going to move that no matter where I move this cursor, other than moving my cursor up and down will then determine how many columns are pasted. And then I click paste, or click, and then I can see this is also going to adjust the formatting, so you got to play with this a little bit. That's why I recommended that. So notice when I zoom in, you'll see how it, because of that width and because of just how the formatting of the Excel file is, it narrowed those columns quite a bit. So if you're going to use that feature, you may have to, do your paste, play with the setting to dial things in a little bit, and then once you have that in, then you can do your paste and set things the way you want. So that's with Word. You can also do the same, or Excel, I should say. You can also do the same thing with Word. Paste that. Again, this is using the 6 inch column width and the 1 inch gap between. And finish that. See a little bit of formatting issues when it comes to the table. So again, depending on how you have your data set up and what you want to paste in, you might have to play with a combination of those settings for the column width and the gap width, and also possibly the formatting in the Word or Excel file, just to get things dialed in to have it display the way you want. Okay, and looks like I have another question here. So after importing a Word document into Revit, can borders be created without any being present in the Word document, or does this need to be done manually in Word? You could create borders, but you'd have to manually draw those in currently. But if you have borders around the data in Word, I have to think about that, because it won't. If it's a single page paste, you could draw a border that way. Yeah, there's no way currently to draw borders around them from the Word document itself. Those you'd have to draw in manually. I don't know of a way to do that right at the moment. And that was for Shane. Let me make a note of that, because I'll see later if there's, after I get off the line with you, if there's some issue in our issues database related to that. And if so, I'll get back with you on that, Shane. Shane, A-I-E-N. Raw borders around Word paste. In Word. Okay. So I have a note there to the side to check on that. There may be an issue that someone's requested such a thing, and I can just check the status on that and then get you data on that afterwards, Shane. All right, so that's a little bit on the scale when it comes to setting the paste width and the gap width. And then here, the text scale, this is what I use for demonstrating the features of the program. And that's this is just a ratio of the text size or point size of the text in Word or Excel compared to the measurement being used in the project, in this case inches, but if it's metric, it'll apply to that. Either way, it doesn't matter. However, in fact, let me close this a second and just go to another sheet here. And go back, or say scale. So the default is to use text mapping. So what this will do is when you install the program initially, it looks in the project that you open, and it will fill in the Revit text sizes based on what's in the project at the time. These fields, though, both the ones for the point size and also for the Revit text size below it, are directly editable. So what that means is this: if you need 12-point text, for example, to map to 3/32, then you would edit that directly and then save your settings file. We'll go File, Save Settings. And then whenever you paste with this settings file loaded, it will map the 12-point text to 3/32. Now, in most cases, what you would want to do is you would just want to have the point sizes that exist in your Word or Excel file mapped here. So if you have others that aren't others listed here that aren't actually in the source file, then you could just zero them out or clear them out as needed, just to keep things neater. And then you can map the text sizes to the Revit text sizes, or the point sizes to the Revit text sizes that you want. So pasting, this is where you split paste into columns, and also notice this skip initial toolbox when making a paste. So this used to not be on by default, but I think it's on default now. But I'm going to take this off for a second and save my settings. And I'll show you pasting with it and without it. So if I go to a new sheet and I grab a section of my Excel file, copy that, and then click paste. So notice without that option on, it gives me this dialog box right at the beginning, and it says pick origin point for the paste. So I click that, and then go and click once on where I want to start to paste, and then finish again, and then it does the paste that way. Now, it saves you a mouse click with that on because it automatically puts you in placement mode. In fact, let me change my scale here to take these off. So now with that option off, if I go paste, notice I'm already in placement mode, and I just click and paste and then finish. So it saves you a mouse click with that option on. All right, so now I go back to the settings here, and that was pasting and then linking. So the default and the way the program was designed is to create a link back to the original document and set it to update automatically when the project opens. Now, the reason the program is designed the way it is for external files and to link them is because of this. When we first were putting doing research actually to add this sort of functionality to MicroStation back in 1996, actually before that, most of the people that we talked with told us that they would often get Word or Excel files from areas outside the design area. And those, they would get them from places like finance or management, but they were data that they would have to make part of their projects. So when we were talking to them, they said they didn't want to run into a situation where one's changes in one place would overwrite changes in another. In other words, we were looking initially at making it a two-way flow where we could paste the data from Word or Excel into MicroStation, for example, and then also edit the data in MicroStation, have it push it back to the Word or Excel file. But when we talked to people about that, they said they definitely didn't want that because they didn't want to run into a situation where the actual present time data might be overwritten one to the other. So we early on then decided to make it a one-way flow from the Word or Excel file being the source file to the paste being a reflection of what's going on in the source file. And that carried through when we were also developing the version for AutoCAD and also the version for Revit. Now, we have had some people ask for a two-way flow, but it's very specialized cases that people have asked for it. And if we do develop a program eventually that would be able to go both ways, it would probably, per the product manager, end up being a different program. Again, because the orientation and the structure of this program from its inception was to deal with external files and paste them in with the external files driving the paste and what the paste looks like. But if you have a scenario where you want to just paste the data in, and you don't want it linked back to the source file. In other words, you want to be able to edit and update the data within the project itself. You can do so. And the easiest way would be to go to the settings here, turn this option off, click OK, and then do your paste. In that scenario, then you'd be able to paste the data and use every other setting in the program that you want. It just wouldn't be linked back to the source file. And then as a result, you could edit and maintain that data, that paste within the project from then on. However, once you're done and you want to be able to paste with that setting on, is you can go File, Load Settings, and just reload the settings file, and it'll reset that option for you that was saved into that settings file. Another thing about settings files is if you have a scenario in your group where you deal with different clients, which most of you will, and you have differing or slightly differing specifications for working on different projects or different clients, then you can save out different settings files for working on those particular projects or for those clients. The way you do that is you go File, Save Settings As, and give it an appropriate name, like a project name or customer name, and then tweak the settings as you need for that customer or that project. And sometimes people will organize those the settings files for Microsoft Office Importer out in a central folder that's set to read only on some network drive or something like that. Or they'll create a subfolder under where the project is stored itself and save the settings file for Microsoft Office Importer for that particular project or that particular customer, for example. And then what they'll do is they'll go File, Load Settings, and then load whatever settings file is appropriate for the work they're doing in that particular project. You also have the ability to set the relative or absolute path for the paste with the link back to the source file, and you can save that with a mapped letter or a UNC path. And like I said, also we've got some functionality in a version to link via SharePoint and also BIM 360. I just haven't had a chance to play with it yet. I don't have it set up to be able to show you that yet. But again, we're alpha testing that, and as soon as we're satisfied with it, people that may want that functionality, we can get them that to be able to check that with the version that has that. And Thor rightly answers, yes, the two-way flow was bad in our industry. You are correct. All right, and then updating. So this is the last piece here. Now, the settings here are a settings file setting, meaning whatever's saved in the settings file in this area, that when you close Revit, the next time you open it, that's what will apply or be enforced the next time you open a Revit project, or when you open Revit, actually. So the option for Revit, the default, is to ask before updating any automatic paste. So that means you close the project, next time you open it, it checks all the source files, checks the exact pasted areas, and if it sees any changes in the source files, it'll say, hey, I found paste that could be updated. Would you like to do so, yes or no? If you say yes, all the ones that need to be updated will be. If you say no, you can still manually update them one at a time through the Manage Link dialog box, or multiple ones at a time through the List of Links dialog box, both of which I showed you earlier. You can also say update all the automatic paste without asking. That's the default for the AutoCAD and MicroStation version. However, Revit users wanted more control over that, so we changed it to the second option for them specifically. But if you wanted that as an option, you could set it and then save your settings. And then the next time you open a project, it would then automatically update the paste without any intervention from you when you open the project. And lastly, you could say don't update any automatic paste at all. In that case, you can still manually update them through the Manage Link dialog box or List of Links dialog box. All right, so now if you run into issues and you want some help from tech support, if you go to your settings and then here off the help menu, you click that and you click about, this opens a web page and it gives you some information that would be helpful to you in dealing with technical support, but also would be helpful to them in helping you. And that's this. On the left-hand side here, it'll give you the exact version of the program you're running. It'll also tell you the status of your license, basically what type of license it is. If your license is an expiring one, it'll give you the date there. It'll also give the exact build date and time of the version of the program you're running. All of this data when it comes to the version here, and then the build date and time, and also what type of license, and also expiration date. All this would be helpful for support. And if you need to find your license file, it'll be listed right here as well. Now on the right, it'll give you our contact number. If you need technical support assistance, you just call that number there and ask for support, and you'll get right where you need to go. All of our technical division personnel are on support duty, so the likelihood is that you will almost always get, it would be extremely rare that you would never get a live person to talk to. And also, if you need further help, you can check our knowledge base. You can also create a new support ticket through that link there. You can also email us at support@axiommint.com. Now, this will also create a support ticket as well. So in addition to the new support ticket link that you see above there, if you email support directly, it'll also automatically create a ticket. And all of our technical division personnel have access to our ticketing system, so the likelihood is you'll very quickly get a response back to get the help you need. So that's all I have for the this kind of group training session for Microsoft Office Importer for Revit, with some data on some future things that we're working on in the program now that we're testing alpha-wise to be able to get out to people. So with that, is there any questions here before I let you go? This is still the best thing that has happened to Revit. Wow, thanks, Thor. I appreciate that. I'll make sure that the product manager gets that data from you. Now, also, I'll mention, before I let you guys go, the support@axiommint.com email address can also be used for this type of thing as well. If you have other things that you run into with the program, and you'd like to say, hey, if you guys modified this particular feature to work in this fashion, or if you added this ability for this feature to also do this, and if you also have other things that you run into in your Revit workflow or other CAD or BIM program workflow, and you want to see if we have a program, or you'd like to request that we look at developing a program to help with whatever that is, anything along those lines, you could use that email address for as well. And I was just reminded by my co-organizer here that there is a poll that we've got for you guys. So we're going to give you a poll before I let you go. And if you could go ahead and give them the poll now. So the poll is, did you learn something new about the tool or tools that you already use? Cool. Alrighty then. So we'll keep that up for another 30 seconds or so. Now, if for some reason, after the fact, if you run across questions or other things that, about the program that you maybe didn't ask or didn't think to ask, and later you go, oh, I remembered, then just go ahead and use that support@axiommint.com email address, and we'll get your questions answered that way too if needed. Ain't a problem. Okay, so yes, all the attendees, to answer that question, related to the recording of this training, will get that recording. Once it takes a little bit of processing time once I stop recording, and I'll check the audio, make sure it's all fine, and then I'll get it up in a location. Either it'll be on our FTP site minimally, but I'll also put it on like a Google Drive or another shareable drive where you can either stream it from or download it from, either way, and then make it available to others that use the program as well as needed. All right, then. So I'm going to wrap this up. You can stop, I guess, the poll now to my co-organizer here. Thank you guys for answering it. And thanks very much for attending. And let me just check the questions here. See if there's any other questions here before I go. Yes, understood. Thanks. Good, Shane. All right. So thanks you guys very much for attending. I really appreciate it, and I hope you got a lot out of it. And again, the video will be available for you in a little while. and you can get that to others so they can benefit from what you saw here as well. And I have so I have one thing to check on for Thor and also for Shane as well. So I will do that as soon as I get off the line here and get you guys an email with some data on those. That's all I have. I'll let you go for now. Again, thanks very much for attending. I really appreciate it.